Hello. Well, we have a wonderful example here of what's called confirmation bias. So I thought I might just go through it with you. And actually, I found another bit of confirmation bias. So I'll make another video about that after this one. But this seems to be the age of the confirmation bias, doesn't it? Look, here, BBC chairman, the over 50s think we're biased towards the left. Oh, we only think that, do we? Right, now, let's start with this. This chap here, Sir David Clementi, who is the outgoing chairman of the BBC, take a look at him. Do you reckon that this guy is over 50? I may be making a mistake here. I mean, young people do live hard and fast nowadays, but it looks to me like he's substantially over 50. And he apparently doesn't think the BBC is biased to the left, does he? So it's obvious he knows that some people don't think it's biased to the left. And yet he can make that sort of a sweeping statement, even though he is in the very demographic he's criticising. This is a very typical example of how a lot of people, especially in the BBC, but particularly on the left, how they look at the world. George Orwell noticed this in one of his. Oh, well, yes, it was, of course, it was in 1984. And he was talking about the ability, in order to survive in that society, the ability you had to cultivate to hold two opposing thoughts simultaneously and believe both of them to be true. And he came up with this idea, and it's quite obvious. He had observed this among various people, and the various people he associated with were mostly on the left. Even when he fell out of love with the left, most of his friends were still in that group. The thing about people on the right, they may have nasty thoughts, but they generally speaking don't make a fuss about it. They just come out with it. You know what I mean? They don't hold two thoughts at the same time. They just come out with nasty stuff. At least you know where you are with them. I'm not saying they're right, by the way. Anyway, here's this Sir David Clementi. So let's just go through his little think piece here. Well, rather the interview. Anita Singh, Arts and Entertainment Editor. Right. Only the over 50s believe the BBC is too left-wing, the corporation's chairman has suggested. As he said, perceptions of political impartiality are age-related. That may be true to a certain extent, and it's not so much a matter of perceptions of political impartiality as the ability to see things through the lens of long experience. Sir David Clementi said yonger people tend to believe that the BBC is too right-wing and part of the establishment. And I believe that that young people do tend to believe that the BBC is part of the establishment. But that's not because they watch the BBC. That's because they're watching stuff on YouTube that says that. That's because their teachers say that. Actually, Mr. Clementi, they don't watch BBC at all. And they haven't done for years. I used to work for Radio 4 and I always listened to Radio 4. I used to listen to it all the time. And then one day, this was about, 10 years ago, maybe a bit more. One of my sons said, "Do you know, I've just discovered Radio 4. We have it on all the time." I was astonished. I thought everybody listened to Radio 4. For those of you in America, it's sort of like PBS, but a lot better. I mean, at least it was a lot better. You'd have plays, you'd have arts programs, you'd have discussion programs. You'd have news programs, and they were all really high quality. They were a little left-leaning even then, I know that, because even when I was under 50 and working for the BBC, I was aware of its left-wing bias. So much for that, Mr. Clementi. But at least I knew that the programs were solid quality. They're not solid quality anymore, by the way, and I no longer listen to Radio 4. But the fact is, I was shocked that my son didn't know about Radio 4, and that was a while ago. So they certainly don't know about Radio 4 now. They don't listen to that stuff. They listen to podcasts. They access YouTube blogs and Instagram and that sort of thing. They only know about BBC what they have been told, not what they experience. You are on a losing wicket when you think that your demographic is people under 50, especially people under 30. Hang on, let's go on. There's a general trend. We do a lot of impartiality surveys, and they show that about a quarter of our audience think we lean to the left, and slightly less, but nevertheless a very substantial number, think we lean to the right. I don't know whether you think this is audience. You have surveys. This depends. If you go out into a shopping mall and you ask kids, is the BBC left or right-leaning broadcasting company, they will say whatever they think sounds right. But they don't necessarily have to be your audience. Sir David recalled giving a speech to students in Salford shortly after December's general election. That's interesting. He was in Salford. That's where the new BBC studios are, by the way. So he just went out to the local university or college. He didn't go out to like Winchester or Leeds or anything like that, did he? Just round Salford. Well, let's look at it this way. The Manchester area, any of those conurbation type places tend to have a lot of left-leaning people anyway. So if you're in Salford, you are going to get a lot of people of the socialist persuasion. You can't surely have forgotten that Liverpool was almost a riot city not too long ago, being led by radical areas of the Labour Party. So quoting people in Salford is like going into a leprosy hospital and asking people how worried they were about losing fingers, and then saying, well, the people I asked, they're all worried about losing fingers. Anyway, 6 or 7 young students came up to me to berate me on the BBC's performance in the election, which they said had been so heavily biased towards the Conservatives they couldn't believe it. Well, I've just spoken about it. What I'm rather interested in, though, is his form of expression. Because look at this. It is sort of interesting. It's just a tiny thing. And when people are talking, they tend to make mistakes grammatically, and you can't really make too much of a fuss about it. But I was impressed by this, or rather, it did strike me. 6 or 7 young students came up to me, notice that me there, to berate me, and that's an unnecessary repetition of the word me. And I would have said, I think, something like 6 or 7 young students came to complain about BBC's performance, or came to me to complain about me. But he used the word me and me twice within the same sentence. And it strikes me that he was thinking rather a lot about himself. And maybe I'm reading too much into that. Speaking to the voice of the listener and viewer autumn conference, Sir David went on, there's a very big age-related issue around the matter of impartiality. we take it seriously. No, you don't. The only way you take it seriously, I know, I've been there. The only time you take it seriously is when you're being told off, and then you've got to think of ways of justifying yourselves. There is absolutely no way you take this seriously. I keep saying, I know, I've been there. The only way they take it seriously is by privately insulting the people who have written in. In one of his final public appearances before he steps down in February, Sir David took the opportunity to hit back at politicians who criticised the BBC. That's what you're there for, BBC, to be criticised. I find that too many of the people I talk to with very strong views about the BBC don't spend too much time with the BBC. Well, that goes for those students in Salford as well, Sir David. They get up with Today, they go to bed with Newsnight, and they don't watch much in between. Yeah, well, I used to listen to the afternoon play, and then I just got fed up of it, because it was the same woke nonsense. And that's why they don't listen to it. If it were engaging, if it were interesting, if it actually catered to the people who lived here and not the people in some theoretical universe. There was one, I keep talking about this, but it's a very famous example, The Archers. It's a soap opera. It was originally started, I think, in the 50s or the late 40s by BBC, as it was set in a farming community, and it was basically a way of telling farmers about new farming methods. That was one of its remits. And it was very successful. People in the towns liked to listen to it because it was like a breath of country air or something. And it was, it's just basically a soap opera. It's a lot less farm related now and a lot more woke. And one of I stopped listening to it ages ago, but very shortly after this, there was a party conference. No. Tony Blair went to talk to the National Farmers Union, and he got roundly booed because of his handling of various agricultural matters, including the foot and mouth fiasco, which I have already spoken about in a video, maybe one back from this. Now, he was booed, he was criticised, people were shouting at him, but the BBC had done their episode of The Archers before the conference. And it went out on the day after the conference or something like this, and it featured two of the farmers talking about the conference, which hadn't happened yet when the writers were writing it. And the conference... And they were saying how marvellous Tony Blair was. Didn't he have a fresh, invigorating view of farming? Wasn't he with us? Well, of course, that was all over it was all over the Telegraph. It probably wasn't all over any of the other papers. But that was how the BBC were. They were criticised for it, but that was a symptom. It wasn't a single crime. It was the way they thought they could form the countryside. As a matter of fact, just around the time of the hunting ban thing, I was at a conference in the BBC, and there was they had a speaker there. One of the speakers was a young woman from South Africa and speaking for a South African broadcasting company. And she was talking about, specifically, she was talking about the Archers because they were trying to, again, inform farmers about farming methods, using a radio show to, sweeten the message. And she was saying the problem is that we in our, metropolitan areas and Port Elizabeth and Johannesburg, what right do we have to tell the farmers out in the bush how to conduct their lives? And I didn't stand up and say, because, they were all nodding sagely. Yeah, of course, they didn't say a cultural sensitivity at the time, but that's what they were all thinking. And I didn't stand up and say, Okay, everybody, if you think it's bad for people in Johannesburg to tell farmers in the bush what to do, then why do you think it's okay for people in London to tell people out in Norfolk what to do? I didn't say that because I was too much of a coward. Yeah, mea maxima culpa. Okay, okay, so let's get back to the subject. Of critics who want to see the license fee. Sorry, yeah. And the thing about getting older is I am less afraid of being unpopular and far less afraid of saying things that other people don't like. And that's what's happening here. When you get people over 50 criticising the BBC for being left wing, it's because they know what's going on and are prepared to say it. When I was younger, and especially when I was working in the BBC, I tended to keep my thoughts to myself, except once or twice. And then I had a couple of rows and I got rumbled pretty soon and they sort of pushed me out. But that was definitely the case, that as I've got older, I've got more outspoken. I've got less afraid. And that's what happens with the older generation. So instead of saying, Sir David, that older people are critical of the BBC because they're ossified old fossils, like you indeed, no, they're just more likely to say what they really think, and what they think based on experience, not based on what somebody else told them, which is very frequently what happens when younger people say what they think they think. What was it? Sorry. Mark Twain said something like, when I was 17, I realised my father didn't know anything. And when I was 21, I was amazed at how much he'd learnt since I was 17. All right, speaking, so the voice of the listener and viewer. For the great majority of our output, we are very good. Yeah, well, this is nice to know you're very good. But Director General Tim Davie has made this his priority number one, and we're doubling down on impartiality. Yeah, there have been a few examples of impartiality, which just make a joke of impartiality, actually. Let's see. Of critics who want to see the license fee scrapped in favour of a Netflix-style subscription, he said, I have no doubt that the BBC could thrive as a subscription model, but it would not be the BBC that the nation knows and values. Look, I'm sorry, Sir David, but the BBC that the nation knows and values is long dead. I'm sorry to have to break it to you. It's a corpse. Well, it's a zombie. It's lurching about the airwaves, parroting what its controller tells it to do. The BBC that I knew and loved and valued is gone. So, Netflix fight. No, the way it is now, it will not thrive as a Netflix-based subscription model. It will not thrive because no one will listen to it and no one will spare the effort of paying for it. I don't pay for it. I don't listen to it either, by the way. So there you are. And I am one of the demographic you really want to attract. You should be attracting. Well, no, maybe not. Because I think, and what you want are people who don't think, people who follow the line. People who don't see anything wrong with reporters dashing at Dominic Cummings and sticking microphones in his face when they know that they're supposed to be keeping distances. Yeah, one rule for us, another rule for other people. Those who promote, there are a lot of them, the notion of a subscription service brush aside these points. What, the points that you get interviewers giving their opinions in what are supposed to be impartial interviews? They rarely grapple with the technical oh, for goodness sake, Netflix, Amazon, They all grappled with the technical problems, and they're doing very well, thank you very much. They do not explain how radio is to be paid for. They don't engage. Well, it's not being paid for anyway. They do not explain how radio is to be paid for. They don't engage with the commercial reality of a subscription service. Yet, a commercial reality of a subscription service is when you put out stuff people listen to because they trust it. Not necessarily because they agree with you, but because they think you're telling them the truth. Their argument is largely ideological, and what if it is? Sir David said that US streaming giants have plenty of entertaining content, but in terms of inform and educate as well as entertain, the BBC reigns supreme. It did. It did. But it does not now. And it does not now because it is not responsible anymore to its listeners. And that's the problem. It used to be that the people who were in there had a sense of responsibility to the news, to the facts, and to the people they were transmitting this stuff to. Now they don't have that sense of responsibility, and they need reining in. And the only way we can do it is with some sort of financial constraint. And you're not listening to that. Maybe because you're over 50 and don't think straight anymore. Asked to name the biggest challenge of his chairmanship, Sir David said that charging the over 75s for their licence fee was the most difficult decision we've had to make. Oh yeah, this hurts me far more than it hurts you. They actually got a concession from the government on the understanding, on the agreement, on the promise that they were not going to charge the over 75s. They got the concession and then they charged the over 75s. That was a difficult decision. No, it wasn't. The problem is the BBC is a bloated, left-leaning, well, it's a falling over left organisation that's filled with a bunch of people who live in a bubble and cannot... Even the ones who were in Salford, by the way, they're just commuting between London and Salford. I don't think many of them actually live in the north. You know, far too working class for them. Right, that's it. Well, that's the thing about Sir David Clementi and the BBC leaning to the left. Why not treat yourself or a favoured relative or friend to these magnificent examples of merch? The mugs and t-shirts come in the Graniopteryx design or Grambo with a firearm or the more deadly knitting needles. Go to www.graniopteryx.com and whatever platform you're watching this on, please click like, subscribe and share.